Hi, you're watching Floyd Steinberg's YouTube channel. Finding a Yamaha SY99 on eBay or other auction sites in a good condition is increasingly rare. But I managed to find one for a really good price. The vendor said the display is broken and one of the keys is sticky. So today I'll try to service this 30-year-old flagship synthesizer, replacing the screen, inserting new batteries, and upgrading it with a USB floppy drive emulator. And if you think that's interesting, please join me in this video. Here we go. The Yamaha SY99 was released in 1991 as the successor of the SY77. It's a synthesizer that evolved both Yamaha's AWM and FM synth engines. The first one is sample-based subtractive, while the other is frequency modulation. The knack here is that the SY99 can use samples as operators for FM synthesis as well. Other than the DX7, the FM engine has multiple waveforms you can work with and 3 feedback operators instead of only 1. The SY99 is 32-voice polyphonic and 16-part multi-timbral. The whole package is topped off with an effects section, which still sounds great today, and a sequencer. Hardware-wise, we have 3 mod wheels, a 76 keys keyboard, 2 volume sliders for its 2 outputs, a surprisingly big LC display, a data entry slider, a jog wheel, and a multitude of buttons. On the back we find 5-pin MIDI in, through and out, connectors for a breath controller, connectors for 4 pedals, 2 stereo outputs, and a headphone jack and an on-off switch. I bought this SY99 on eBay and then paid UPS to get it to my place safely, which cost me around $60, and it worked just fine. As you can see, this keyboard is in a very good shape. The only thing that needs looking after is the very dim display and the storage batteries. They had no flash RAM back in the day, so patches were held in memory with battery power. So I'm going to replace those and also install a USB floppy emulator so I can easily transfer patches from my PC to this synth. Okay, let's begin. The first thing you want to do is to remove all the screws from the bottom plate. By the way, having a couple of glasses for collecting and sorting the screws is a very good idea. Also, having some electric screwdrivers and some sellotape at hand will come in handy later. After removing all the screws, you can lift the cover up from the back side, pushing it slightly towards the keyboard. It will then come loose, and we can take a look at those precious 1991 electronics. This machine is absolutely crammed with boards and cables. What you can see here are RAM and ROM chips storing samples and waveforms and the operating system. The squares here are Yamaha's custom chips for effects and the synth engines. On the left there's a floppy drive and on the right the PSU. The display is found on the other side of all these boards, and to get to it we have to take all of this apart. Here are all the parts I bought. This is a cheap emulator from China and 2 replacement batteries, buttons, and a white on black LED screen I got from a German vendor. I will link all of these in this video's description. You need to buy a 720 kilobytes drive emulator for the SY99. Also, I ended up not using the button switches this time because I found all the buttons were working. Let's start with the easiest part, replacing the floppy drive. There are only 3 screws holding the drive in place. Remove them and then you can remove it by pulling upwards at the back. Then remove the 4 small screws, attach the emulator drive and put everything back into place. By the way, it's a very good idea to remagnetize your screwdriver tips. Eventually, you'll lose a screw, and getting it back from this multi-layered maze of cables and boards is going to be tough. Now it's a very good time to check if your shiny new screen is working correctly. On the smaller board, there's a ribbon cable connector that's the same size as the one on your new screen. Unplug the old ribbon cable and then plug in your new screen, turn on the SY99 and your new screen should light up. Check for faulty pixels and backlight problems. If everything's fine, we can now proceed removing the 2 main boards. Unplug all the ribbon cables on both boards. Don't worry, they're designed in such a way that every connector has its own shape, so it's impossible to reconnect them in a wrong way. The smaller board is fastened with 6 screws. Remove them and then remove the board by pulling it upwards and then towards the back of the synth slowly. Put it aside as we'll need to resolder the battery found on this board later. Remove all the screws holding the other mainboard in place, then carefully cut the cable tie on the right side. This board carries another battery, so set it aside as well for further treatment. Put aside the black protective foil found under the mainboard. Now remove the metal bracket that holds the silver protective foil in place, then remove the sticky tape found underneath it. Now it's time to remove the keyboard. Unplug its ribbon cable. The keyboard is held in place by 4 long black screws. Remove them and also remove the 4 screws holding the silver foil near the power supply in place. You can now lift the keyboard up on the left side. Move it only a bit away from the rest of the synth. Then on the right side, lift it up carefully, not damaging the aftertouch ribbon cable. We can now remove all the screws holding the big silver foil in place. Place the foil aside and then remove all the screws holding the card slot board in place. It's not necessary to unplug all the cables here, we'll just turn that board around a bit. Now remove all the screws holding the smaller silver foil in place and put that aside as well. Remove the silver foil near the power supply unit. And next we want to remove that frame that carried the main boards. Undo all the screws holding it in place, including the ones on the power supply board, and then set the frame aside. Now turn around the expansion slot board and unplug the cables on the power supply board. Carefully place them on the left side, uncovering the metal shielding which covers the display. Remove the last 2 screws holding the PSU board in place and unplug the aftertouch board. Remove these 2 cable holders and then remove the 4 screws holding the shielding in place. Here's an idea that might help you reassembling the synth later. Tape the screws to the parts they belong to before continuing. You can now lift up the shielding, set it aside, and finally, the screen is in sight. But we can't remove it just yet. Next step is to unscrew the card reader on the left side. Then remove all the screws holding the bottommost board in place, turn it around, and now you can remove the screen cover and the screen itself. But in order to be able to take the whole thing out there, remove the control cable from the bottom left corner of the synth. Now pull that cable through the hole in the board and now you can grab the screen and its compartment. Remove the screws holding the screen and then remove the screen. Take some seconds to celebrate this moment. Up to here, nearly 4 hours had passed and I was sweating. And now, it's time for this.
Oh, get down, baby, get down. Right on, get down.
And by the way, it's a very good idea to clean the glass protecting the screen thoroughly before attaching the screen. You'd kick yourself if you see some grains of dust or fingerprints every day using the keyboard. Once you're sure everything is clean, place the screen on its protective case and fix it in place with the 4 screws. And now it's time to reassemble. Place the screen back into its slot, cable facing right, then put the controller board on top of it. Lift the whole synth up a bit and move the parts around until they slide into place. Then fix the board with its screws. Next, put the card reader back into its place and fix it with its screws. Put the floppy drive holder into its rightful place next. Next, put the shielding carrying the expansion card slots back into place and fix it with its screws. Put the PSU board and the power cable holder back where they belong and reconnect the aftertouch board. Also, reconnect all the cables to their respective sockets. Now carefully turn around the expansion slot board and then bring the cables back in position. Then fix the board in place. Attach the cables back to the shielding using the cable holders. Reattach all the ribbon and other cables to the expansion slot board. Put the metal frame supporting the keyboard back in place, put the silver foils on it starting on the left side and attach them using the screws. Put the keyboard back into place beginning on the right side. Be careful not to damage the aftertouch ribbon cable. Slide the keyboard onto the black notch. Then do the same thing on the left side. Lift the synth up a bit and fix the keyboard back in place using the 4 big black screws. Now fix the 2 keyboard support frames back in place. Now replace the old batteries. They're soldered to the board, so you need to unsolder them. This isn't too hard. Heat up the pins on the other side of the board while pulling on the old battery. It will come loose eventually. Now you need to remove the surplus solder to free up the holes in the board, so you can insert a new battery. For that, best use a solder pump. Place the pump on one side of the hole, then heat up the solder from the other side and then trigger the pump. Then align the battery on the board correctly. The upper pin is the positive. Hold the battery in place and put on the heat from the other side until the pins are covered in solder. Repeat that with the second board as well. Now put back in both boards and connect all the cables. Do not forget the black protective foil like I did here, which belongs under the big board. Now close the lid and put back in all the screws. Congratulations, with a bit of luck, there are no screws left and the SY99 can be turned back on without problems. Check that all the buttons and wheels and sliders are working properly and then perform a factory reset by holding voice, D and 8. Job done, let's listen to some patches and then let's wrap up this video. Oh, by the way, if you like content like this, and if you want to see more SY99 content on this channel in the future, please consider subscribing to this channel. And if you want to support what I'm doing here financially, you can become channel member using the button under this video, or join my Patreon. Thank you very much. Yeah, and that's it for today. The Yamaha SY99, one of Yamaha's high-end workstations from the late 80s or early 90s. And if you found this interesting, please consider subscribing to my channel. And as always, thanks for watching and see you again very, very soon. Bye bye!